Minutes past the hour. We've got a quorum here, so should we get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So great to see all of you here. Thank you for joining. We are talking about a very hot topic today, all about benchmarking. What we've been hearing in the market quite a bit from our customers, and especially these days, are questions like, how do I know if my team is performing well? Or is this conversion rate good or bad? Or something like, how does this compare to my peers, but like the relevant peers who I'm actually competing with or who are relevant to my market, not just like broad industry benchmarks. So we brought together two experts here today to answer those types of questions and talk through how to apply benchmarking best practices that we use with our own customers all the time. So I'm very pleased to introduce Fiona Chu. She's one of our revenue growth architects at Winning by Design. She specializes all day, every day in evaluating company performance and determining where those opportunities are for growth. And then we also have Sarah Houlihan here with us. I'm very excited about that. She's the VP of Revenue Excellence at Clary, where she heads up all of the sales programs, competitive intel, sales enablement, value consulting. I think there's like 5 other things in there as well at Clary. And so she's going to share with us what she's personally done and what has worked well in the field with her team. So Sarah, thank you for being here and for sharing that perspective. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before I hand it back to Fiona and we get started?
No, just happy to be here. Happy to connect with folks on the call, answer any questions about, how we're doing it here in Clary. And before that, I was at Salesforce. So we're putting it into practice on a smaller scale at Clary, but a lot of what Fiona recommends for companies and analyzes of companies, I've done in-house for the last decade or so.
Excellent. All right. This is going to be a good conversation. Fiona, all yours. Take it away.
All right. Thank you for that intro. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, good to go.
Great. Again, thank you, Sarah, for the intro. And also really happy that Sarah can join us today. I'm really passionate about this topic because a little bit about me. Yes, I'm a revenue architect here at Winning by Design, but previously my background's in analytics, and I built tons of models to support decision-making ranging from operations to strategic planning. And I used to be one of those people who actually analyze the data wrong because I'm not benchmarking end to end and looking at the holistic picture. So I hope we're going to take you on a journey and hope you get all the key takeaways that I've learned in a couple of years here at Winning by Design. And yeah, when you're benchmarking your go-to-market performance, not end to end, there's a lot of negative implications. You might not come to the right conclusions and you end up spending your time on the wrong problems, making investments where you're not able to see the return on that investment. And ultimately, it prevents you from hitting the next stage of your growth target. So this is a very important topic and something we're really passionate about at Winning by Design. So at the end of the session, you'll get an overview of our Bowtie Data Model. We're going to talk about how to use the Bowtie model for benchmarking, as well as different types of benchmarks you want to consider. And then we're going to wrap up the session with some Q&A from both Sarah and I. So this is the Winning by Design Bowtie model. What it is a quantitative representation of the customer journey in a recurring revenue business. And traditionally, we have a sales funnel, which talks about, how many leads are we getting, how many deals are in the pipeline, how many are we closing. We decided to flip it to the side and put also emphasis on the first impact, retention, and growth side of the business, because that's where sustainable growth comes in. How many of you have actually heard about the Bowtie or already use it in their business? You can type it in the chat. Take a quick look. Awesome. Diana, you took on revenue architecture. There's some love for the Bowtie. That's great. That's good. A lot of fans here. We're so happy to hear that. And for those of you who haven't actually been introduced to the Bowtie, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. So a lot of times people track volume metrics. So how many leads, how many closed won accounts, how many accounts are up for retention in the current year. And the Bowtie, we also focus on conversion metrics, on how are customers passing through each stage, and what is that conversion rate stage to stage, so we can look at operational efficiency from end to end and also see where the opportunities of improvements are. So for example, we're talking to 100 prospects. How many of those are actually successfully converting to marketing qualified leads? Win rate is a very common conversion rate that most companies already track, but looking at this end to end, there's a lot of key conversion points that can give you a lot of picture in how your revenue engine is doing. The other layer that we'd like to talk about is the time metric as well. You might have really strong volume metrics, really strong conversion metrics, but it's actually taking you a lot longer than your peers to close a deal, and that's something to consider. And of course, the sales cycle is only one part of it. We also want to think about how quickly customers are getting to impact, how quickly you're able to engage your prospects into becoming engaged accounts, and et cetera. So to summarize this slide, our Bowtie model, quantitative representation of our customer journey, and the key volume metrics, conversion metrics, and time metrics are the different facets you would like to look at. In this presentation, we're going to focus mostly on conversion metrics, but definitely keep in mind that time metrics are also an important perspective. Here is an example of how it might look like. So we had a fintech company who's 10 million in ARR, 15K in ACV, running a 2-stage inbound sales motion. Their deal volume is about in the hundreds per year. So this is just an example of how, when you map out all the different conversion points, from prospect all the way to win, all the way to retention and growth, how it might look like. One thing about the bow tie, actually 3 things, is that you want to make sure you're choosing the right metrics for your business. The bow tie is a foundational model, but not everything would apply. It really depends on your segmentation, your geography, and even your product maturity and the different types of go-to-market motions that you have supporting different products. For example, you might have been selling the same product for 10 years, but recently launched a new one. The go-to-market model that you have for the 10-year more mature product could look completely different from the one you launched recently, because you're still trying to establish that product market fit. So I can go through some examples of how you might tweak the bow tie to fit your business, just so that it makes sense for when you're analyzing your revenue engine. So if, for example, you have a 1-stage motion go-to-market model, and which means you don't have a separate prospecting function from your sellers, you might not look at CR3 and CR4 separately, because you don't have CR3 and CR4 typically measures the efficiency between the handoff between the 2 roles. So because you don't have that, you'll merge the 2 together. Similarly, if you're only running an outbound prospecting motion, you don't have a concept of MQL, because all of your sellers are targeting your target accounts and getting them to get to a first meeting or first demo. You would merge the CR1, CR2. This one's an important one. A lot of our clients actually don't track first impact. And because we want to also show that for a closed account, getting impact is important for them to get to retention, a lot of times we have to merge that data together to see a blended result. And actually, I think, Sarah, you have some anecdotes here from Clary you'd like to bring over.
Yeah, for sure. So as Fiona and I were talking about this before the presentation, I was sharing that, most companies I've worked with and for in my career have always been very net new ACV focused, very much on that left-hand side. And at Clary, we really are looking kind of at this full holistic picture that you see in the bow tie model here. And just like, if your ACV numbers look great, you don't always dig into your conversion rate. It's not until something feels off there, right? You start digging into your conversion rates. For a lot of companies, if their renewal numbers look great, they have a really sticky product, they have a really loyal customer base, it's really easy not to start to dig into, are we effectively onboarding our customers? Are we proving out the value that we sold in that left-hand side in that initial engagement? And then you can be surprised when you find out that there's shelfware or a new competitor comes to the market and starts to take your business, or the economy becomes difficult and folks have to rationalize their spend. And so one of the things that we do at Clary, like I said, we're looking holistically at this full model. But we also work through not just our services team, but through parts of my team, through our value engineering team, to be able to benchmark our ROI and the value that our customers are seeing from our products within their own business, but also across their peer set. So when we're working to win a deal or win a new customer, we build out business cases, we build out ROI models. We say, this is the value that you will see from Clary. We follow up with that once they become customers and on a regular basis when they are customers. So it's not just something we pull out of our back pocket when we're going to a renewal, but it's something that happens on a quarterly cadence with our customers, with most all of our customers that the account manager runs, to check in and make sure that we're ahead of any adoption issues, of whether or not we have the right executives. We're a very chief revenue officer, VP Rev Ops, SVP of sales driven purchase. So we want to make sure that we are constantly engaged in showing value there. And so we have found that using not just product usage data, but benchmarking data and ROI data regularly and often has really kind of solidified that CR5, CR6 bucket. So growth comes a lot more easily.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. All right. So another consideration about the bow tie is you might be running a business pure usage-based platform and you actually don't have upsell opportunities. So in this example, then you wouldn't actually use the standard CR7 way of calculating your growth segment. You might be looking at other metrics such as annual invoicing and other key metrics that are relevant to the revenue side of your business. And the last application I wanted to go over with the bow tie is when you're looking at segmentation. If you have multiple segments in your business, it's really important to look at them separately, because if you merge the two together, you really miss the nuances of the end-to-end customer journey for those specific customers. So for example, here, we know a lot of customers actually do separate out win rate for their different segmentation. However, they don't follow through with it all the way from kind of lead generation, account engagement, all the way to retention and growth. You can see here, in this example, the enterprise segment of this company, the target account engagement and generating that interest for those enterprises a little bit weaker than the SMB, which is normal as we see companies move up market, but being able to split it out actually gives you a lot more clarity on where you need to focus for each line of business. So to summarize, you want to make sure the bow tie is customized and makes sense for your business. Some of the customers who've been through a go-to-market diagnostic with us or have learned about the bow tie have mentioned that looking at the numbers in the bow tie framework has helped them align at the executive leadership level. Also, because they've already tracked some of these numbers, it's just a nice way to think about the processes end to end and really truly understand where the problems are instead of fixing them in a silo. So now that you've seen the bow tie number, it's really important to be able to measure and benchmark it holistically, as we mentioned. And we talked a little about looking at the data in silo. This here, you can see that if you look at these numbers independently, you might have completely different conclusions from when you look at holistically. So for example, here, we see that, marketing conversion is pretty high compared to benchmark, and you might think that, okay, the marketing engine is working. You might see that the SAL creation is low and immediately blame that the SDRs are not qualifying properly. And similarly, if win rate is super high, a lot of times sales likes to take credit and think that, sales is doing a great job. And then on the other side, when you see that implementation and client management is maybe not living up to benchmark, you would immediately think that the problem's on the right-hand side of the bow tie. But if we look at all of these metrics holistically and think about how they relate to each other, you actually come up with very, very different, you actually see the problem in a different light. So typically when we see high CR2, low CR3, and high CR4, we usually see that it's the inbound filter maybe is not strict enough and you're passing off non-qualified leads that are not ready to engage with sales yet, passing them over to the SDRs. And then similarly, when we see such a high win rate and such low acceptance rate from the sellers on the leads that are getting passed to them, they're usually, pushing through really, really hot prospects who are just already ready to buy, and not doing a lot of that kind of diagnosis up front and working on kind of the harder to close deals. And similarly, we see that the left side of the bow tie actually impacts the right-hand side a lot. And when there's not a lot of qualification up front and finding customers that are a good fit, we see that the numbers actually impact the right-hand side and seeing lower first impact, lower retention, and lower growth numbers as well. So here you can see that when you look at them holistically and think about the relationship between the different customer milestones, you'll be able to fix these problems kind of not in a silo, but figure out what actually is the root cause. I'm going to pass it over back to Sarah to talk about, how Clary does it in the field, and how she looks at the data holistically.
Yeah, of course. And I will say, my Zoom has crashed once. And so if I disappear, I will be back. I don't think it will happen again, but just in case. So a couple of the things that we've done here at Clary. So historically, we've been really good at keeping an eye on our early indicators. We were having weekly early indicators meeting with our finance leaders, our marketing leaders, our sales leaders. We're really good at seeing what's happening top of funnel. At the same time, given the product that we sell, we've been really fortunate to have a lot of insight into our pipeline and our forecast and the predictability of our business, because we're drinking our own champagne, using our own products there. But a lot of that has been really disjointed. So kind of going back to what Fiona was saying, when you've got all of the pieces of your bow tie model separate from each other, it's really easy to look at one part, or to have one team look at one part and say, the world is amazing or the world is awful. So for example, you can look at website conversions have, quadrupled this fiscal year. Demo requests on the website are up week over week. And to think, amazing, everything there is great, and it's going to have a huge impact to our business. If you don't follow it through the model, for example, you may miss that, yes, demo requests are up, but they're not from our target buyers, or they're not in industries that we can sell, or they don't match our core ICP. And so we're seeing, you may see a ton more early stage pipeline and think it's going to convert. It's going to get there eventually. Maybe it's just taking more time. And as you dig into the full picture of not just your early indicators and not just your end result, but what's happening along the way, it really helps to be more diagnostic and more prescriptive about the fixes that you have. So in that example I gave, right, of, top of funnel looks great, it's not converting. There's a variety of things that you can find, right? So as we went through a similar exercise, we listened to every early stage meeting. We heard what was happening. We looked at the emails, and we saw that it wasn't a sales execution issue. They were doing great discovery. They were doing follow-up. But we needed to tweak some of our messaging. We needed to tweak some of our outreach, because we were bringing in a broader audience that didn't fit who converts, right? Who becomes a Clary customer. And again, going back to what Fiona was saying, not just thinking about how do you get to the next stage, or how do you get to the next stage, or how do you get to sign deal. You want to make sure that the customers you're bringing in are renewable customers, and thinking about that from the start. So it's one of the reasons that my team exists at Clary, because we sit across early stage prospecting through renewals. And we started saying, okay, we've got this great top of funnel view. We've got this great end stage ACV view and renewal view. We need to bring those together and have a holistic view across our business, not just of the sales leaders who are driving activity, but also of our cross-functional stakeholders, our enablement leaders, our marketing leaders, and the folks who need to adapt, support, train, provide content and assets to be able to feed that model. And so we've been really focused. Conversion is the name of the game. And I think probably for most companies, I was doing a panel last week with a partner at Sapphire Ventures who was saying across his portfolio, conversion is the name of the game. It's the kind of top for everyone. And so seeing where there's an issue, and what we have found is that looking at conversion helps us be really, like I said, diagnostic. If you're moving from early stage to becoming vendor of choice. And that's where you're dropping off. The levers that you will pull, the things that you will try will be really different than if you're having a hard time converting the volume that you have in an early stage opportunity, for example. So our focus now is really on efficient and sustainable growth. And we want this, like I said, to be recurring impact, that this doesn't just end when the deal is signed, but it's something that carries through how we show value to our customers, how we are planning ahead 6 to 9 months for renewals to make sure that we have time to look at and not get surprised by a conversion rate there. That 6 to 9 months out, we have the runway, the capability to increase adoption, to increase customer knowledge, to increase customer training, and really to solidly hit that impact bucket. So we're not surprised by any conversion rate in the growth bucket. They're going to happy to answer questions in the Q&A portion or dive deeper into any of the things that we've done here. But moving away from everyone runs their area and we have an assembly line and we assume that the other pieces of the assembly line are firing on all cylinders, we are running a holistic business. The other thing that I'll add to that, Fiona, just as you were talking earlier, that sparked in my mind is around win rates and how you have to segment not just by SMB versus enterprise or different industries, but even different contributors to pipeline too. So one of the examples that we talked about is, you may find that your marketing contribution to your pipeline is down, but if the pipeline that's sourced by your account executives, your sales team, is converting at a higher rate, it has a higher win rate, it has a higher average sales price, the solution may not be to ramp up your marketing engine. It might be to put more resources into what's working. Now, other companies, inbound might be the name of the game to fueling their business. And so for them, the answer might be, oh my gosh, we have to fix something in our marketing engine because that's a material impact to our quarterly number. Back to you, Fiona.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, that's a really great example of making sure that when you're analyzing your bow tie and looking at these key levers, it is applicable to your business. And for example, a PLG company would be very, very different from ones that are selling truly to like named accounts and enterprise. So the way when we do go-to-market diagnostics, we definitely want to ensure that the lens we're looking at the bow tie is enhanced with kind of what makes sense for the business that you're running. So very great example and very key takeaway.
Fiona, before you move on, we have a question. Stephen, thank you for your question. He's asking, can you explain how you objectively measure the end of CR5? What's that end point?
Right. Stephen, just to clarify, you're asking about reaching the first impact stage?
Yeah, I think that's what we can talk through.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is one thing.
On the left side of the bow tie, it's all very kind of like methodical, structured. We know how that goes, MQL, SQL, sales accepted opportunity, whatever it might be. It's not quite as clear cut, I don't think.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. First impact is one that not only do we see our customers tend to struggle with because, like you mentioned, it's not as clear cut. There's a lot of different considerations in there, but also one that's really hard for us when we do diagnostics to be able to help measure because some of that data is actually not captured. And the answer to the question, I would say it depends. For example, if you're running a PLG motion where a lot of the impact that you're expecting for the customers are expecting are in the product itself. For example, your say, Uber Eats, that first impact, maybe a customer signs up and that first action that realistically helps dictate whether or not they got impact from the product could be they put in their first order. So, from a PLG side, a lot of that data could be tracked in maybe the product itself. Whereas if you go on the other end of the spectrum, you're thinking about the enterprise accounts and you have extremely long implementation cycles. Your first impact not necessarily be when the product is up and running, but when that prospect or that team going through the implementation process actually sees value and has that aha moment of, hey, this is exactly what I signed up for. Maybe going through the setting up certain accounts or getting some data exports to help them upload into that the product to do that transition. A lot of times what is key is finding out what that impact is in the sales cycle. So you can't get that impact unless you've diagnosed it in the sales. So if you're familiar with I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Winning by Design SPICE framework, but when we talk about discovery and diagnosis, we like to think about discovering the pain that the customer or prospect you're talking to is facing, what kind of impact, both rational and emotional, is they're expecting. And then with that, as long as the sales, during the handoff to the post-sales team is able to communicate that impact, that's a key moment that we can measure, whether it's from product data or from the CSMs who actually manage the customer relationship. Sometimes a little bit more manual because of the long implementation cycle, but sometimes it's quite easy as well. So it really depends on kind of what kind of business you're in and how automated it can get.
I can add a little bit to that.
Sarah, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, for sure. So for us, we look at adoption, we look at usage, and not just on a pure license count, what are our monthly active users, daily active users, but our product, we're lucky that a lot of C-level executives log into our product. That's not typical for software. And so if we see that adoption and usage is declining amongst kind of the executive team, the revenue leadership team, that's an issue. But that being said, we need the data from the reps in there, right? We want them to be living in it, to be using it. And so we have to be looking at both groups. We also look at across different parts of our product. Obviously, Clary is really well known for forecasting. There's a lot of power in our analytics suite as well. And so if we see that they're only using it for forecasting, they're not taking advantage of all of the predictive analytics and all of those resources, that gives us something to fix and to solve for. That's something that we can go in and engage with the customers to solve. But generally what I see, and I've seen at most of the companies I've worked kind of for and with, is you tend to reverse engineer what's correlated to churn. And if you see customers who churn, customers who choose to leave our platform are most likely to have adoption issues, to have usage issues, to have product market fit issues, then you can say, all right, those are things that we need to solve for to fix the end result. And those are things that we want to drive adoption of, or usage of, or completion of. And it might be simple too, right? That completion of customer certification and education on how to self-administer your product leads to them being able to drive impact within their own business. That's a binary, did they do the certification or not, versus things like adoption and usage are ongoing things that you have to continue to strive for. So generally speaking, I know Fiona said it's different for every business. We've always looked at what's correlated to a negative outcome. How do we fix and solve for that proactively?
Thanks, Sarah. Stephen, I hope we answer your question.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, if not, we can dive a little bit deeper in Q&A as well. Cool. So yeah, we've talked about the bow tie and how we should use it kind of end to end, look at it holistically. We can talk about now some ways that you could use the bow tie and how you would find kind of that benchmark data. So there are 3 types of benchmarks that typically we use, especially if you ever engage in a go-to-market diagnostic with us. The first type of benchmark is really benchmarking against your own baseline. So you want to measure against your progress against your historical baseline, against kind of your situation. And the pros of this is that it's really unique to your business. Anything that you've made adjustments in the past, you know exactly what you did and how that's correlated with what kind of results you're seeing. One thing that a lot of clients cannot measure against their own baseline is because maybe they haven't implemented kind of the bow tie and they haven't been able to have clean data historically. So in that case, they might need to look at their peers or general industry benchmarks to see how they stack up against while they get their baseline kind of up and running and measured and ready for use. So the second type of benchmark, Sarah already mentioned, but there's kind of looking at relevant peer benchmarks. There are tools out there, such as one of the tools that we co-launched, which is Benchsites, and also you can use tools like Clary Labs to get relevant benchmark in your industry to help see how you stack up against kind of your peers. And because it's specific to your industry and peers, it's a little bit more relevant to your business, and data usually from these sources are generally updated and more recent. Depending on which industry you are, though, some downside of this is you might have a very small sample size, or this actually could be very hard to find if you're in a very niche environment. And third level of benchmark we also look at is kind of general industry benchmark, which typically has large sample size and is readily available from like certain industry leaders. They might publish some annual report on how calls are converting into demos, or how retention rate is going. So those are also, a third line of defense if the first two aren't available. But of course, keeping in mind that general industry benchmarks are not exactly relevant to your business and very broad strokes. So sometimes you want to take it with a grain of salt. And since they're not exactly relevant to your relevant to your go-to-market motion or your product maturity and things like that.
I'm very curious to actually get a bit of feedback here if we can. So it sounds like we have a lot of Bowtie users and Bowtie fans on the call right now. That's fantastic. I'm curious where you are in, each of your own benchmarking journeys. If you're using the Bowtie, are you doing this number one here, using it to sort of benchmark against your own baseline on an ongoing basis? Or, have you then taken the next step to then take that information and then benchmark it against some other peer set? Where, can you type in the chat, where are you on your own benchmarking journey? Couple seconds for people to chime in. Or maybe this is all just very new and you're at the very beginning, which is fantastic too.
Yeah, I'm curious. Own data baseline, awesome. Yeah. Great, a couple people use.
Okay, Tom, you're looking to benchmark to help diagnose. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar against your baseline, James against your own data, starting with own data. Yep. Fiona, that I imagine that's pretty typical with the conversations that you're having as well, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people benchmark against their own data, but it's important to make sure you look at it holistically. Again, not in a siloed fashion. It's easy to look at trend line for certain conversion points. And that's what we see a lot of our clients doing. And yeah, definitely looking at the benchmark, the Bowtie as a baseline, as a holistic model. That's kind of the key takeaway. Cool. Awesome. Really glad to hear that a lot of people are using baseline and own data. Actually happy to hear that you are able to rely on your own data, because a lot of clients that we work with, they don't trust their data in Salesforce, so they aren't able to look at and compare kind of their metrics that way. So it's good to hear that data hygiene is holding up in a lot of your companies. Awesome. So I'm going to go through an example of why looking at internally first is actually important, and sometimes looking at industry benchmark or even peer set benchmark might not be as relevant. So we had a company that came to us. They are a security solutions company, very strong inbound engine, exceeding their growth targets, doing really well and winning against competitors, very high LTV compared to first purchase. But they came to us to do a right-hand side of the Bowtie go-to-market diagnostic. So naturally, first thing we did, look at their data, look at the Bowtie numbers and see what we can gather. So initial observation, they're not tracking the first impact. They are fairly heavily PLG, and they don't have that data readily available from their product team to actually know when a customer reaches that first impact moment. So unfortunately, we had to merge CR5 and CR6 in this case. Doing so, we saw that, they're a little bit below benchmark in this area. So our line of reasoning took us, well, what's happening pre-sales? Is there anything that's happening pre-sales that are affecting the low impact, low retention rate? So that brought us to looking at the conversion points CR3, CR4, which is between the SQL to SAL to win. A couple of points that we observe is that the reps are really selective. So we're seeing that they're not accepting a lot of leads that are coming from the prospecting team. And when they're converting really high. And this is a result of their being really selective and only pushing through those prospects that are ready to buy and very, very engaged and already know of the security solution. And part of that, as a result, they don't have to spend a lot of time doing diagnosis of that pain and impact. And because they're not able to diagnose what type of impact the customer is looking for and set them up for success, when they're passing over these customers to the post-sales organization, the CSMs, that's not being clearly communicated. And then CSMs aren't set up for success to do their jobs with customer onboarding. And another layer deeper, when we look through at the roles and responsibilities, it actually wasn't clear who in the organization they were appointing to be responsible for kind of making sure the activation piece. Is it kind of the implementation team? Is it CSM, or is it the sales rep who actually kind of carried the deal through to post-sales? So there's a little bit of both misdiagnosis or lack of diagnosis of impact that's causing some of that lower retention number, but also we discovered there's some org implications as well that could help facilitate. But okay, this is 85 versus 91, not a big deal, right? And again, this customer came to us and asked us, well, like, we really need to work on our growth. Like, our growth is not, they're reaching their growth numbers, but for some reason, their right-hand side of the bow tie is not working. So went down the path and followed through. Okay, what is their expansion rate? When we looked at their expansion rate, we actually were surprised. We saw that they're way above industry benchmark at 63%. So they're actually doing really well. And then we were a little bit puzzled because they specifically wanted to improve their expansion. And we saw this and we're like, okay, like, what is the issue? So here is why looking at internal data and understanding what's expected and your potential is important, because when we looked at their data, we realized that their high expansion rate is actually driven by additional products that they've launched, and they're leveraging these products to do the upsell and the expansion, getting that expansion dollar, but they're actually not doing a really good job at selling the older products that were in their portfolio. So if they keep just adding new products, that could help with their expansion, but the potential of what they could sell is actually far greater than what we're seeing in the numbers. So in this case, we can see that the industry and peer benchmark that we pulled is actually completely not relevant, because this company had really, really huge upside on their expansion side of the business. Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Sari to talk about, in case you're interested in getting started with benchmarking.
Yeah, so before we jump to Q&A, we have a few resources to share with you so that wherever you are on your own journey, you can be enabled with some tools and resources to help. So yes, we're going to send out these slides after. So, we can, well, and I'll post the links in the chat if you want to check them out now, but we'll send all these resources out after in an email. If you want to download your own bow tie model poster, the bow tie model that Fiona showed before, you can download it at that link, or we can also print dry erase posters for you that a lot of our customers like to have physically in their office, put up on the wall, so that they can, write on them and corral the whole team against, where their current metrics are. So those resources are there for you. And then for the second option that Fiona was talking about, benchmarking against a relevant peer set. So we mentioned bench sites earlier to benchmark for that. And so that link there that you see is where you can start to do that and find your relevant peer set. A lot of that data is very recent, so it's a highly selective data set, and I think you'll find that to be fairly valuable. And then, as far as the general SaaS benchmarks, there are a lot of those out there being published. If you work with us as customer at Winning by Design, we, will gather those for you as well to put together relevant benchmarks. Resources like Clary and lots of others have, publish information like that all the time as well. So lots of stuff out there for you. We'll send all this out. And Fiona, back to you.
Awesome. I think actually it's still you.
Yeah. There's a plethora of content out there for you. And if you are interested in more sessions like this on relevant topics across all things GTM, there's lots of ways to stay engaged and involved and get this information right into your inboxes or feeds or whatever you choose. So we have a monthly research newsletter that goes out. You can sign up at that link. Two places to follow to get more information like this are our founder, Jocko van der Kooi, on LinkedIn, or our our corporate Winning by Design LinkedIn account. We publish information about these upcoming workshops there all the time. And then you can always go and see what the calendar of events is on our website at our events section. We always have a full calendar of more events just like this. All right, now, Fiona, back to you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so so that's most of our content. So some final things to keep in mind is that you want to start, if you're going to start measuring and benchmarking your data, start with your own baseline, make sure it's end to end. And when you do apply kind of the 3 types of benchmarks, you want to make sure you're picking one that's suitable for you and focus on your own baseline first before you kind of reach externally for pure benchmark validation. And if you don't have that, then you can go to a 3rd level of defense of general benchmarks. You want to use the bow tie to dive deeper into root cause. Again, the bow tie is really meant to facilitate alignment across functions and you're not supposed to use it to make decisions on a silo. That really helps kind of pull out of the silo thinking and align across the whole end-to-end customer journey. Some things to keep in mind. I think, Sarah already mentioned, you can't measure what you don't manage, or you can't manage what you don't measure. So start measuring your data, making sure there's good data hygiene, put controls in place so that you can trust the data and trust the outputs that the data is showing you. Cool. I think now we're in the Q&A session of this workshop. Any other questions that you have for Sarah and I?
It's been great. Thank you. Super helpful.
Awesome. Thanks, Kier. Yeah. Any other thoughts or reactions? Anything you disagree with?
Yeah. Any other approaches that anyone else has been using successfully? It's a meaty topic.
Yeah, I'm curious how, what are some of the key takeaways from you all who are on the call, and what kind of immediate actions you might do, especially with your ops team, on how to start measuring some of this data.
Yeah, we didn't dive into the roles of the folks on the call here. So, typically we're talking to a mix of ops folks, of CROs, of sales leaders. Yeah, I'm not sure if, oh yeah, Tim says great insights, especially when you have specific metrics missing. Yes, absolutely, Tom. Yeah, so these types of insights typically resonate with ops really well. They really love to dive in, and then it's a conversation of getting your entire GTM team aligned around this sort of change management of benchmarking and making that a part of the ongoing culture of the team, like Sarah's done.
So the first thing that we started with, which is not rocket science, we started putting in a pipeline council. Started doing a monthly pipeline council with our revenue leaders, our customer value and adoption leaders, our go-to-market support team leaders, my team, marketing team. The meeting doesn't solve problems, but getting everyone together to look at the same data and to say, oh, well, you're not looking at this, or this context is missing, or in the enterprise market, it's that. Especially being mostly virtual, there was a lot of value in getting everyone together in the same kind of quote unquote room to look at the same baseline. And it took us probably a quarter or 2 to refine what we were looking at and to refine the audience. And now we're at a part where it's pretty machine-like to prepare for it, to read out on it. We're able to see changes over time. And we're able to use that time to change our strategy, change our focus, change our outcome, what programs we build, what content we build. So again, when I started and I was like, we really need this. I kept saying a meeting is not going to fix a problem. A meeting is not a silver bullet, but if we use it effectively and we have the right people, we can start to ask the right questions, have the right inputs to then have our silver bullet and solve any issues we come across.
Sarah, I'm curious if you can talk about how did you get the data to the state where leadership will actually trust and rely on whoever is pulling it?
That's a good question. And this is an area I'm very fortunate to be working at Clary, because we opened Clary. We opened Clary and showed our analytics views, we pulled up the funnel view in Clary and could diagnose by leader, by source, by whatnot, just by, we had to make sure we had the right filters. And some leaders would say, oh, I didn't realize that's the one that we were using for pipeline source. I was using this for my team. So we hit a couple things like that. And having not been able to use that to pull data at different points in my career, to just be able to open it up and say, I think anyone who works with revenue teams, or depending on your role, there are times where someone will say, where did that pipeline go? And to go back and figure out, did it push? Where did it go to? Where did it disappear? Is it coming back? Did it shrink? And so I feel really fortunate that those are part of our company DNA and views that I can just pull up and use. So getting trust in the data was not a hurdle that we had to overcome. It was more proving out the value of taking people's time. It's a really expensive meeting to get all of your revenue leaders together for an hour, and then proving out the outcomes, and proving out how we could actually drive an impact to the business and not just measure and look at what was happening.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Clary, how often did you get together to measure or to review the Bowtie model?
We meet, we get that group together live monthly, but we are meeting with individual leaders on a biweekly basis. So our enterprise segment, our EMEA segment, our commercial and emerging business. And then, my team and I are looking at it, if not daily, then weekly, because again, we all have access to it and can see it. But we're doing smaller group diagnostics, like I said, biweekly, full group together on a monthly basis.
Yeah. So every time I look at the Bowtie, I struggle a bit with the conversion rate 1 and conversion rate 7, because I think they're a bit more open in what you put on, on the calculation. So any tips on, what should we be including in CR1 and CR7 to do it properly and to benchmark it correctly?
Yeah. CR1 is a very hot topic, even internally. We had a couple of rounds of kind of discussions internally with especially our marketing architects who are obviously very passionate about this. The answer to CR1, the answer to your question on CR1 is depends what kind of go-to-market model are you using right now? Are you more on the PLG side or prospecting? Or
we do both inbound and outbound, so
okay.
It's 50-50. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can kind of talk about the two ends of the spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, if you're purely more inbound driven website conversion based, a lot of times we actually ask or when we do the go-to-market diagnostic, we also look at kind of website conversion to net new visitors and also net new and how that converts to net new leads. So that's kind of purely demand based, looking at we don't want to ignore those that are only become leads in our instance, because a lot of the prospects are actually on our website doing something that we might not have them known yet. So we want to make sure that piece of the puzzle is not missing. On the other end of the spectrum, when we typically look at account base or named account base, because our clients will typically have that list, a finite list of universe of their accounts, who they're targeting. They know exactly which roles are, the personas and which account and company names they're targeting. That ends up becoming the kind of the denominator of CR1, and then how many of those you're actually able to successfully engage in to be an engaged account and then subsequently set up a demo. So those are the two ends of the spectrum, and usually our clients kind of fall in between, and that's where we typically segment the two. Okay, well, how is your marketing engine like funneling in, and how many of the deals are actually driven by kind of the inbound funnel versus how many are being prospected, and that would be slightly different calculation.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
And like you said, CR7 is a little bit tricky as well. As the example that we just showed, it really depends on your business. Some of our clients don't have kind of upsell potential, so we would look at the kind of revenue changes year over year to see how a customer brings LTV into their business. But in some cases where customers do have additional licenses, or they do have the upsell and cross-sell opportunity, we'll look at it holistically and see how their second or third year actually measures up against their initial contract value. The key thing that I think I forgot to mention earlier is when we look at the bow tie, we look at it on a cohort basis. So a lot of times companies are looking at expansion, retention, contraction, maybe year over year. But if you don't look at it from a cohort basis, you're not able to compare how a customer is actually growing relative to their first year with you. So that's a lens that we love to look at when we do go-to-market diagnostic, to see what is that actual trend line when you hit a customer with 100K ARR, how much are they growing? Are they becoming 200, 300K ARR with you in the course of 2-3 years versus overall, what is that ARR?
Cool. Thank you.
No problem. Any other thoughts or questions from the attendees here? All right. I think, Sari, I think we might be able to wrap up.
I think we can wrap it up. All right. So everyone, thank you for joining, for your input and insights. Sarah, Fiona, thank you both. Really appreciate it. As I mentioned, we're going to send all this information out to you with the recording so you can go back and digest. I know it's a juicy topic. So again, thanks everyone. Cheers and have a wonderful rest of the week.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great
Thanks.
day.
Bye.